And let's bring in Peter Tragos. He's a personal injury and criminal defense attorney. Peter, thank you so much for being here. So we just listened to Brian's piece there. We got Brian's reaction. What's your reaction to how Casey White's lawyers reacted to him calling Brian? I mean, they certainly seem to be taken off guard.
Yeah, I think it's always difficult, especially as a criminal defense attorney, to say anything about what your client does, what they say, especially of their own accord. So it's difficult to say he wasn't telling the truth. I understand that maybe there are some false confessions in the past, that they're going to try to show a pattern here, that he falsely confesses to murders for whatever reason that may help them in an upcoming trial. But it's always difficult. Usually the best practice is to stay tight-lipped and not even comment on your client's public statements.
All right. Do you believe that White is telling the truth in all of this?
So it's hard for me to say. I mean, I guess when we look at the fact that there's nothing really corroborating a crime like this happening in this area where he confessed that crime pretty specifically with a woman and a baby girl, that is something that I would think at this point would have been found as a missing persons or some kind of open investigation at this point. And because there's nothing of that sort, I would lean, with his defense team, with local law enforcement at this point, saying that he probably was not telling the truth when he made that confession.
All right. So Peter, how does a defense lawyer deal with a potential false confession from their client? How do you strategize a defense around that?
So under normal circumstances where there's a false confession that you're arguing he was coerced, he wasn't read his rights, he was in some sort of situation where law enforcement painted him into a corner or backed him into a corner, and he had no other recourse but to say, okay, fine, I did it. And those types of false confessions potentially violate your client's constitutional rights. But here we have him reaching out to Brian Enton on a recorded line that he knew was recorded, because all jail calls are recorded, and made this statement. And in this case, I think it can be argued that he did it on purpose, or he did it to try to create some kind of pattern that can be used in a current murder trial. And dealing with this false confession is very different than the false confession they're probably dealing with in the actual murder trial. That's not as easily disproven, because obviously there are more things that law enforcement and prosecutors think that connect him to the murder he's currently on trial for.
Okay, so speaking of that, Peter, I mean, in this case, doesn't matter whether or not White is in fact telling the truth. We know he'll be behind bars for the rest of his life. Before today's sentencing, he still had more than 75 years of a prison time of a sentence. So, and that's also not counting this pending capital murder trial. So does it even really matter?
So practically speaking, for his life and his sentence, it doesn't matter. He has 75 years left, plus he has this life sentence he just got handed today, plus he's on trial for murder. So it doesn't practically matter to him, but it could matter to the victims' families if something like this ever comes up, or they do find a missing person. It could come into play if he is tried for that murder. This is absolutely admissible as his statements. And it could come into play if they arrest somebody else for this murder, because they could say, look, this known murderer confessed to doing this on a recorded line, and it could affect that prosecution. So that's really the only way it could matter, is if something comes up that's reasonably similar to the facts that he confessed.
All right, laying it all out for us, personal injury and criminal defense attorney Peter Tragos. Thank you for your time. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.